Look in the mirror. What do you see? Your face, your hair, your skin, and probably, if you are honest, things you wish you could change. Maybe your nose, maybe your skin tone, maybe your weight. This desire to change how you look, to become more beautiful, is completely normal. Humans have wanted to be beautiful for thousands of years. We put on makeup. We style our hair. We choose clothes carefully. We exercise. We diet. All to look better, to be more attractive, to fit the standards of beauty. This seems harmless, natural, just part of being human. But here's what nobody tells you. Beauty has killed more women than most diseases. Beauty has caused more suffering than many wars. Throughout history, women have poisoned themselves, broken their own bones, crushed their internal organs, and slowly destroyed their bodies, all in the name of beauty. Victorian women ate arsenic to make their skin pale. Renaissance women put deadly nightshade in their eyes to make their pupils larger. Ancient Egyptians wore makeup made from lead that slowly poisoned them. Chinese women deliberately broke the bones in their feet and bound them for years in terrible pain. And in the 1920s, women applied radioactive creams to their faces hoping for glowing skin. They got cancer instead. Today we think we are smarter, we think we know better. But women are still dying from plastic surgery. Still destroying their bodies with eating disorders. Still poisoning themselves with dangerous products. The methods change, the pressure remains. This is the dangerous history of beauty. And it starts with poison. Before we talk about the terrible things women did to themselves, we need to ask a simple question. Why did women do these dangerous, painful, deadly things? The answer is complicated, but it starts with this truth. For most of human history, a woman's appearance determined her entire life, her future, her survival, her value. In many societies, beautiful women could marry wealthy men. They could escape poverty. They could gain security and status. Ugly women, or women considered ugly by the standards of their time, had fewer options. Fewer choices, harder lives. Beauty was not just about vanity or pride. It was about survival, about having a better life, about having any power at all in societies that gave women almost no power. So women looked at the beauty standards of their time and tried desperately to meet them, no matter the cost, no matter the pain, no matter the danger. And the beauty standards? They were often impossible, often cruel, and often deadly. Let's start in ancient Egypt, over 3,000 years ago. Egyptian beauty is famous even today. We have all seen images of Cleopatra with her dramatic eye makeup. That distinctive black line around the eyes. It looks beautiful in pictures and movies. But the reality was much darker. That eye makeup, called kohl, was made from a mineral called galena. Galena contains lead. Yes, lead, one of the most toxic substances known to humans. Egyptian women, and men too, applied this lead-based makeup around their eyes every single day. They believed it made them beautiful. They believed it protected their eyes from the sun and from infection. And in some small ways, it might have helped. But it was also slowly poisoning them. Lead absorbs through the skin. It enters the bloodstream. It accumulates in the body over years. And it causes terrible damage. Lead poisoning affects the brain, the kidneys, the nervous system. It causes headaches, confusion, weakness, and eventually death. But Egyptians did not know this. They kept applying the beautiful black kohl, day after day, year after year, slowly killing themselves for beauty. The Romans were no better. In fact, they might have been worse. Roman beauty standards valued extremely pale skin. Pale skin meant you were wealthy. It meant you did not have to work outside in the sun like poor people did. It meant you were aristocratic, refined, important. So Roman women desperately wanted pale skin. And they found a product that gave them exactly what they wanted, white lead powder. They mixed lead with vinegar to create a white paste. Then they spread this paste all over their faces, necks, and arms. It made their skin beautifully, perfectly pale. Exactly the fashionable look they desired. But it was killing them. The lead paste was even more dangerous than Egyptian kohl because it covered so much skin. More surface area meant more lead absorption. Roman women who used this makeup regularly suffered from lead poisoning. Their skin became damaged. It developed sores and discoloration. So they applied more white lead to cover the damage, which made the poisoning worse, which created more skin damage. It was a terrible cycle. Some women literally had their faces destroyed by the very product they used to beautify them. But they kept using it. Because pale skin was the standard. Pale skin meant beauty, and beauty meant everything. The Romans also used another dangerous product, vermilion, a bright red powder made from mercury sulfide. They applied it to their lips and cheeks to add color to their pale faces. Mercury is toxic, extremely toxic. It causes neurological damage, kidney failure, and death, but it made beautiful red color, so women used it. Roman historians wrote about women whose faces were damaged by these cosmetics. Some women's skin became gray and dead-looking from the lead. Some lost their hair. Some lost their teeth. But most continued using the products anyway. The alternative, appearing without makeup and not meeting beauty standards, seemed worse than the slow poisoning. That is how powerful beauty standards were. More powerful than self-preservation. More powerful than health. More powerful than life itself. As we move into the medieval period and the Renaissance, beauty standards became even more extreme and the methods even more dangerous. The ideal of pale skin continued. In fact, it intensified. Queens and noblewomen competed to have the palest, most perfect skin. And they used increasingly toxic methods to achieve it. One of the most famous beauty products was called Venetian Ceruse. Venice, the beautiful Italian city, became famous for this white makeup. Venetian Ceruse was made from white lead and vinegar, similar to the Roman formula, but even more refined and therefore even more dangerous. Women applied it in thick layers to create a perfectly smooth, perfectly pale complexion. The makeup was so thick that it would crack if you smiled. So fashionable women learned not to smile, not to show emotion. They sat still with expressionless faces to keep their makeup perfect. The lead absorbed into their skin. It poisoned them slowly. Their skin became damaged underneath the makeup, wrinkled, discolored, scarred, so they applied more makeup to hide the damage. The layers got thicker, the poisoning got worse. Queen Elizabeth I of England was famous for wearing this white lid makeup. She wore it every day for decades. She applied it thicker and thicker as she aged to hide the damage it was causing. By the end of her life, her face was reportedly destroyed beneath the makeup. Her skin was scarred and discolored. Some historians believe she may have died partly from lead poisoning, though she was also old and had other health problems. But she was not unusual. Many wealthy women of that era suffered the same fate. Their beauty routines were slowly killing them. But they continued anyway. Because appearing in public without the fashionable pale face was unthinkable. It would mean social death. Better to risk actual death than face social rejection. But pale skin was not enough. Renaissance women also wanted large, bright eyes. Eyes that sparkled and seemed more awake. And they found a product that created this effect beautifully. Belladonna. The name means beautiful woman in Italian. Belladonna is a plant. Its scientific name is Atropa belladonna, named after Atropos, one of the three fates in Greek mythology who cut the thread of life. An appropriate name. Because belladonna is deadly nightshade, one of the most poisonous plants on earth. Eating even a small amount can kill you, but Renaissance women did not eat it. They put drops of belladonna juice directly into their eyes. Why? Because belladonna contains a chemical that dilates the pupils. It makes the black center of your eye much larger. This creates a striking, dramatic look. The eyes appear larger, more mysterious, more attractive. For a few hours you look beautiful. But the cost is terrible. Belladonna causes blurred vision. It makes it hard to see clearly. Over time, repeated use can cause permanent vision damage. Some women went partially or completely blind from using belladonna regularly. They literally blinded themselves for beauty. They sacrificed one of the most precious human senses, the ability to see, to look more attractive to others. Try to imagine that. Imagine choosing beauty over sight, but women did. Again and again, because the pressure to be beautiful was so intense. Because their value in society depended on their appearance. Because they had no other power. The 17th and 18th centuries continued these dangerous practices but added new ones. Women still used white lid makeup. They still used toxic rouge made from mercury compounds, but they also developed other extreme methods. Some women would have themselves bled regularly. Bloodletting, doctors would cut a vein and drain blood. This made women paler because they literally had less blood. It also made them weak, tired, and sick. But it was fashionable. Pale, delicate, almost sickly-looking women were considered the ideal. So women made themselves genuinely sick to achieve the look. Some women used leeches. Those blood-sucking creatures that doctors used for medical purposes. Women would apply leeches to their faces to draw blood to the surface of the skin, creating a paler appearance and removing any redness. It was painful. It was dangerous, it risked infection, but it was beauty. Then we arrive at the Victorian era, the 1800s. This might have been the most dangerous period of all for women's beauty practices. Victorian beauty standards were incredibly strict. Women were supposed to be pale, delicate, ethereal, almost angelic. They were supposed to have tiny waists. They were supposed to appear weak and fragile. Strength was unfeminine. Health was almost vulgar. The ideal Victorian woman looked like she might faint at any moment. And many Victorian women did faint, constantly, but not because they were naturally delicate, because they were slowly killing themselves with their beauty routines. Let's start with arsenic. Arsenic is a poison. A deadly poison. It has been used to murder people for centuries. But Victorian women ate it, on purpose. They took small arsenic wafers sold as beauty aids. These wafers were marketed with promises that seemed too good to be true. Arsenic complexion wafers claimed they would give women perfect, pale, flawless skin, glowing eyes, a delicate appearance, and they did work, in a way. Arsenic does make skin paler. It also causes skin to appear smoother temporarily by slightly swelling the tissues. It can make eyes appear brighter by dilating blood vessels. But it accumulates in the body, it builds up slowly. And over time, arsenic poisoning causes terrible symptoms. Stomach pain, vomiting, diarrhea, skin lesions, nerve damage, organ failure, cancer, death. But the advertisements never mentioned these side effects. They showed beautiful women with perfect skin. They included testimonials from satisfied customers. They claimed the products were completely safe, approved by doctors, used by actresses and society ladies. Women believed them. Women wanted to believe them. So they bought the wafers, they took them daily. One wafer with breakfast, one with dinner, following the directions on the package, slowly poisoning themselves. Some women became addicted. Arsenic is actually physically addictive. The body develops a tolerance. Users need more and more to get the same effect. Some women were taking dangerous doses far beyond what the manufacturers recommended. They knew they were sick. They knew something was wrong, but they could not stop. And they did not want to stop. Because when they looked in the mirror, they saw pale, smooth skin. They saw beauty, and beauty was worth any price. Some women died from arsenic poisoning. Their deaths were often mysterious. Doctors did not always recognize arsenic poisoning. Sometimes it was blamed on other illnesses. Sometimes it was covered up by families who were ashamed. But the women kept buying. The companies kept selling. The cycle continued for decades until finally, in the early 1900s, regulations began banning arsenic in cosmetics. But by then, thousands of women had been poisoned. Many had died, all for beauty. Victorian women also continued using lead-based makeup, though they knew by this time that it was dangerous. Doctors had started warning about lead poisoning. Medical journals published articles about the dangers. But many women used it anyway. The fashion industry and cosmetics companies denied the dangers. They said the products were perfectly safe. They said the doctors were exaggerating. They said their products contained only small, harmless amounts of lead. Women wanted to believe them. So they kept buying, kept applying, kept poisoning themselves. But perhaps the most infamous Victorian beauty practice was the corset. Corsets are garments that women wore tightly around their torsos to make their waists appear smaller. Much smaller, impossibly small. The ideal Victorian waist was 18 inches around. For reference, a healthy adult woman's waist is usually between 26 and 32 inches. 18 inches is not natural. It is not healthy. It is not even anatomically normal. It requires forcefully reshaping the body, compressing the rib cage, displacing the internal organs, and that is exactly what corsets did. Women started wearing corsets as young girls, sometimes as young as 8 or 10 years old. Tight corsets, restricting corsets. They wore them every single day, all day long, from morning until night. They slept in lighter corsets. They never gave their bodies a break. Over years, the constant pressure gradually reshaped their rib cages. The ribs, which should be gently curved to protect the organs, became compressed. The lower ribs, which are normally flexible, became permanently bent inward. The internal organs had nowhere to go. The stomach, liver, intestines, kidneys, all pushed together, compressed into the reduced space. The lungs could not fully expand. Women could not take deep breaths. They could not breathe properly. This is why Victorian women fainted so frequently. It was not because they were delicate flowers who could not handle excitement or strong emotions. It was because their corsets were literally preventing them from getting enough oxygen. They would stand up too quickly or climb stairs, or experience any slight exertion, and their compressed lungs could not supply enough oxygen to their brains. So they fainted. And this was considered normal, expected, even attractive. Men said they found delicate, fainting women charming. The corsets also compressed the stomach and intestines severely. This caused chronic digestive problems. Women suffered from constant indigestion, nausea, and constipation. They could not eat normal meals. If they tried to eat a regular amount of food, their compressed stomachs had no room. They felt sick, they felt pain. So they ate less and less. Some women developed serious eating disorders, unable to eat properly even when the corset was removed. Their bodies had been trained to accept only small amounts of food. The corsets pressed on the liver and kidneys, interfering with their normal function. Some women developed liver damage, kidney problems. The pressure on these organs was constant, relentless, year after year. Some women had their lower ribs actually break from the pressure. The bones would crack under the constant compression and then heal in the new, deformed position. Some women's rib cages became so severely deformed that they could never return to normal, even after they stopped wearing corsets. The damage was permanent, and some women died. They died from infections, from organs that failed under the constant pressure, from complications that doctors did not fully understand at the time. But the fashion continued. Mothers put their daughters in corsets, perpetuating the cycle. Because a tiny waist was beautiful. A tiny waist meant you were fashionable, feminine, desirable, marriageable. Women accepted the pain. They called it suffering for beauty. They accepted the health problems as normal. They accepted the risk of death as the price they had to pay. And this was not a small number of women doing something extreme. This was virtually every middle-class and upper-class woman in Europe and America. Millions of women wore these dangerous, damaging corsets every single day for decades of their lives. The collective damage was enormous. The collective suffering was widespread, but it was all considered normal. Just part of being a woman. Just the price of beauty. Just what women did. But Western women were not the only ones suffering. On the other side of the world, Chinese women endured perhaps the most painful, most prolonged beauty practice in human history. Foot binding. For over 1,000 years, from approximately the 10th century to the early 20th century, Chinese families bound their daughters' feet. This was not a rare practice limited to a few extreme families. This was not something done only by the very wealthy. This practice was widespread across all social classes. Rich families did it. Poor families did it. Everyone did it. Over the course of 1,000 years, approximately 1 billion women had their feet bound. 1 billion, let that number sink in. 1 billion women suffered this practice. The practice began when girls were very young, usually between the ages of 4 and 7 years old. This timing was deliberate. The bones needed to still be soft, still growing, still capable of being reshaped. This is what happened step by terrible step. The girl's feet would be soaked in warm water mixed with herbs and other substances. This softened the skin and tissues. Then all the toes except the big toe would be curled under the foot, bent backward and tucked beneath. The 4 smaller toes would be folded completely under, pressed against the sole of the foot. And the arch of the foot would be forcefully bent. The bones would be deliberately broken, cracked, snapped. This was done intentionally. The foot had to be broken to be reshaped. Then tight bandages would be wrapped around the foot, holding everything in this unnatural, broken position. The wrapping was incredibly, unbearably tight. So tight that it cut off blood circulation almost completely. The bandages would be left on for days or weeks. The pain was beyond description. Imagine having all the bones in your feet deliberately broken. Imagine your toes being bent backward and crushed beneath your foot. Imagine tight bindings cutting off the blood flow. The pain was excruciating, constant, inescapable. Little girls cried for days. They screamed. They begged their mothers to stop, to remove the bindings, to make the pain end. But the mothers refused. The mothers had to be firm, even cruel, because they believed, truly believed, that they were doing this for their daughters' future. They were doing this because they loved their daughters and wanted them to have good lives. In Chinese society at that time, bound feet were absolutely essential for marriage. Men wanted wives with tiny lotus feet. Families believed that without bound feet, a daughter would never find a husband. She would be unmarriageable. She would have no future. She would bring shame to her family. Some others, who had themselves suffered through foot binding as children, who still lived with the pain and disability every day, bound their own daughters' feet. They hardened their hearts against the crying. They ignored the screaming. They convinced themselves it was necessary. It was love. After the first binding, the feet would be unwrapped periodically. The mother would wash the feet, massage them slightly, and then re-wrap them even tighter than before. This process was repeated constantly over months and years. Gradually, slowly, terribly, the feet became smaller and smaller. The bones, held in the broken position for so long, healed in their new shape. The toes became permanently curled under. The arch became permanently broken, bent into an extreme curve. The flesh, repeatedly deprived of blood circulation, sometimes became infected. Sometimes parts of the foot would become gangrenous and fall off. Some girls died from infections that spread from their feet to their bloodstream, but most survived. Most endured. And after years of this torture, their feet would finally reach the desired size. The ideal lotus foot was only 3 to 4 inches long. Think about that. 3 inches from heel to toe. The length of a child's foot on an adult woman's body. Women with bound feet could barely walk. They hobbled slowly, taking tiny, mincing steps. Each step was painful. Their entire body weight rested on the heel and the bent big toe. The balance was precarious. They needed canes or support to walk any distance. They could not run, could not work in fields, could not do physical labor. They were deliberately disabled, crippled. Their mobility was destroyed. And this destruction was the point. Bound feet proved that a woman did not need to work, that her family was wealthy enough to support a daughter who could not contribute physical labor. It was a status symbol, a sign that the family could afford a useless, decorative daughter. But it was also a form of control. Women who could barely walk could not run away, could not escape bad marriages, could not travel independently. They were physically constrained, bound in place. The practice was called foot binding, but it bound more than feet. It bound women's entire lives. The suffering was lifelong. The pain never completely went away. Even after the feet stopped growing, even after the binding was loosened or removed, women with bound feet lived with constant pain. The damaged bones ached. The deformed joints hurt. Infections were common. The smell was often terrible because the tightly bound feet could not be properly cleaned. Women developed sores and ulcers. Some lost toes to gangrene. Many suffered severe arthritis and bone deterioration as they aged. Their feet were ruins. Destroyed architecture that somehow still had to bear the weight of a human body, and this was done to 1 billion women. 1 billion childhoods destroyed. 1 billion lives lived in pain. 1 billion women disabled by beauty. Finally, in the early 20th century, social reformers began campaigning against foot binding. They argued that it was barbaric, cruel, that it crippled half the population, that it prevented China from modernizing and competing with Western nations. The practice was officially banned. But the ban was not immediately effective. Many families, especially in rural areas, continued binding feet in secret. They did not believe the reformers. They did not trust the new ideas. They feared their daughters would be unmarriageable. So the practice continued quietly for decades even after the ban. But gradually, over the course of the 20th century, it finally died out. The last generation of women with bound feet are very old now. Most have died. But their suffering lasted their entire lives. And the practice itself lasted 1,000 years. 1,000 years of systematic torture in the name of beauty. Let us return to the West, to the early 20th century, the 1920s. This was the era of flappers, jazz, and new freedom for women. Women had just won the right to vote in many countries. They were cutting their hair short in rebellious bob cuts, wearing shorter skirts that scandalized their mothers, smoking cigarettes and drinking cocktails in public, going to parties and dancing, challenging old rules about how women should behave. It seemed like a new era, a more modern, enlightened time. Women were freer, more independent. Surely beauty practices were becoming safer too. But no. Beauty standards were still dangerous. Still deadly. In the 1920s and 30s, a new miracle ingredient appeared in beauty products: radium. Radium is a radioactive element discovered by Marie Curie in 1898. It glows in the dark with an eerie, beautiful greenish light. When it was first discovered, people did not understand how dangerous radiation was. They did not know about cancer, about radiation sickness, about the terrible ways that radioactivity destroys living cells. Instead, they thought radium was magical, energizing, health-giving. They put it in everything. Radium water, marketed as a health tonic. Radium chocolates, radium toothpaste, and of course, radium beauty products. Companies sold radium face creams with names like Though Radia and Radier. They sold radium-infused makeup, radium powder that women dusted on their faces. The advertising was seductive. The ads promised that radium would make your skin glow with health and youth, that it would erase wrinkles, that it would give you a radiant, luminous complexion. And in a horrifying way it did. Radium is literally luminous. It glows. So women who used radium products did have a certain glow to their skin. A faint luminescence. It looked magical. It looked like the promised radiance. But they were also being slowly killed by radiation poisoning. Radium exposure causes radiation sickness. It causes cancers, particularly bone cancers and leukemia. It causes a terrible condition called radium jaw, where the jawbone literally crumbles and falls apart. Many women who worked in factories painting radium on watch dials, the famous radium girls, died horrible, painful deaths from radium poisoning. Their stories eventually exposed the dangers and led to better safety regulations. But even women who just used radium beauty products as customers, who bought the creams and powders from stores and applied them to their faces, were exposed to dangerous levels of radiation. The products were on the market for years before the dangers were fully understood, and they were finally banned. But by then, countless women had used them. How many suffered radiation-related illnesses? How many died from cancers caused by their beauty creams? We will never know for sure. But we know the products were radioactive. We know women applied them to their skin regularly. And we know that once again, in yet another era with yet another poison, beauty came before safety. This brings us to today, the modern era, the 21st century. We like to think we are smarter now. We have science. We have regulations. We have consumer protection laws. Dangerous ingredients are banned from cosmetics in most countries. Products are tested for safety before being sold. We know about lead and arsenic and radiation. We would never use those things. We know better than our ancestors, right? But do we? Women today are still dying from beauty practices. Still destroying their bodies trying to meet beauty standards. Still sacrificing health for appearance. The methods have changed. The poisons are different. But the pattern remains the same. The pressure remains the same. Let's talk about modern cosmetic surgery and the risks that women take. Plastic surgery, cosmetic surgery, aesthetic procedures. Whatever you call them, they have become incredibly common. Millions of procedures are performed every year around the world. Most are safe. Most people recover without serious problems. But some do not. Some people die. Every year people die from cosmetic procedures. They die from complications with anesthesia. They die from infections that spread after surgery. They die from blood clots. They die from procedures that go wrong in ways nobody anticipated. And one of the most dangerous cosmetic procedures is the Brazilian butt lift, a surgery where fat is removed from other parts of the body and injected into the buttocks to create a larger, rounder shape. This procedure has the highest death rate of any cosmetic surgery. Studies suggest that approximately 1 in every 3,000 patients dies from this procedure. Some estimates put the death rate even higher. 1 in 3,000 may not sound like a lot, but think about it. That means for every 3,000 women who get this surgery, 1 dies. 1 woman goes to sleep expecting to wake up with a new body shape and never wakes up at all. Hundreds of women have died getting Brazilian butt lifts. Hundreds. Died trying to achieve a certain body shape. Died because fat was accidentally injected into a blood vessel and traveled to the lungs or heart. Died from complications that happened on the operating table or days later. Died for beauty, and yet the procedure remains popular. Women continue to get it. Because the beauty standard right now values large buttocks. Because social media is full of images of women with this body shape. Because the desire to be beautiful, to be attractive, to meet the standard, is so powerful that women are willing to risk death. Just like their ancestors. Just like the women who ate arsenic and wore radioactive creams. Different method. Same risk. Same choice. And then there are eating disorders. Anorexia nervosa. Bulimia nervosa. Binge eating disorder, orthorexia, ARFID. These are mental illnesses, yes. But they are mental illnesses driven largely, primarily, overwhelmingly by beauty standards and social pressure. The pressure to be thin. The pressure to have a perfect body. The pressure to look a certain way. These disorders kill thousands of people every year, mostly women, mostly young women and girls. Anorexia nervosa has the highest death rate of any psychiatric illness. Higher than depression, higher than schizophrenia, higher than any other mental disorder. People with severe anorexia literally starve themselves to death. Their bodies shut down from malnutrition. Their organs fail, their hearts stop, they die. And why? Because they are trying to be thin. Trying to meet a beauty standard that tells them thin is beautiful, that you can never be too thin, that smaller is always better. They look in the mirror and see fat even when they are dangerously, critically underweight. Even when their bones are visible through their skin. Even when they are dying. They still think they need to lose more weight. This is what beauty standards have done to their minds. And the problem is getting worse, not better. Social media has intensified the pressure beyond anything previous generations experienced. Young girls, some as young as 8 or 9 years old, are on Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, comparing themselves to filtered, edited, manipulated images every single day. They see celebrities and influencers with perfect skin, perfect bodies, perfect faces. They see makeup tutorials that use dozens of products and professional lighting. They see bodies that are often the result of surgery, extreme diets, personal trainers, and hours of photo editing. But the images look real. They look achievable. And girls believe they should look like that too. They believe something is wrong with them because they do not naturally look like a filtered, edited, professionally lit photograph. So they develop eating disorders. They starve themselves. They make themselves vomit after meals. They exercise obsessively, compulsively, dangerously. They download apps that count every calorie. They join online communities that encourage disordered eating. They compete to see who can eat the least, who can lose the most weight, who can become the thinnest. And some of them die. Their hearts give out. Their organs shut down. They collapse and they die for beauty. For a standard that is literally impossible to achieve without professional help, surgery, and digital manipulation. But even beyond eating disorders, even beyond the most extreme cases, millions of women damage their health in smaller ways pursuing beauty. They inject their faces with botulinum toxin, a neurotoxin, a poison that paralyzes muscles. We call it Botox. It is literally a toxin. One of the most poisonous substances known to science. And women inject it into their faces voluntarily to smooth wrinkles. Most of the time it is fine. But sometimes it goes wrong. Sometimes it spreads beyond the injection site. Sometimes it causes drooping, paralysis, difficulty swallowing or breathing. Sometimes, rarely, it causes serious complications. They inject fillers into their lips, their cheeks, their chins. Hyaluronic acid or other substances pumped under the skin to change the shape of their faces. Sometimes the filler migrates to the wrong place. Sometimes it blocks blood vessels. Sometimes it causes blindness. Yes, blindness. Women have gone blind from cosmetic fillers. Just like the Renaissance women who used belladonna. Different substance. Same result. Destroyed vision for beauty. And beauty products, even today, are not perfectly safe. Many contain chemicals that are potentially harmful. Parabens, phthalates, formaldehyde-releasing preservatives. Some of these chemicals are banned in Europe but still allowed in American products. Some are suspected of being hormone disruptors, cancer-causing agents, allergens. Most women who use these products never have serious problems. But some do. Some develop allergic reactions. Some develop skin conditions. Some potentially develop long-term health problems that are hard to trace back to cosmetic use. And the industry is not always transparent. Not always honest about what is in products. Not always truthful about the risks. Companies want to sell products. They want women to believe their products are safe, effective, necessary. They profit from women's insecurity. From the belief that you need these products to be beautiful. The more insecure women feel, the more products they buy. It is the same pattern that has existed for thousands of years. Sell women something that promises beauty. Do not tell them about the risks, or downplay the risks, or hide the evidence. And profit from their desire to be beautiful. So what do? What is the solution? How do we break this terrible cycle that has been repeating for thousands of years? First, we need to recognize and truly understand that beauty standards are not natural. They are not universal. They are not objective truths about what is attractive. They are constructed by societies, by cultures, by industries that profit from them. And they change constantly, sometimes dramatically. The pale skin that was considered beautiful in the Roman Empire would be seen as unhealthy or undesirable by people who prefer tan skin today. The extreme thinness that has been fashionable for the last few decades would have been seen as unattractive and unhealthy in eras that preferred fuller figures. The tiny Victorian waist would look strange and unnatural to modern eyes. The bound feet that were beautiful in China for 1,000 years horrify us now and seem like obvious torture and abuse. Beauty is not objective. It is cultural. It is constructed. It is a moving target that women are expected to chase no matter where it goes, no matter how impossible it becomes, no matter what it costs them. Second, we need to recognize that beauty standards have been used throughout history to control women, to keep them focused on their appearance instead of their power, to convince them that their value lies in how they look rather than what they think, what they do, what they create, what they achieve. Women who spend all their time, energy, and money on beauty have less time and energy left for education, for careers, for political organizing, for challenging the systems that limit and oppress them. And that is not an accident. That is not a coincidence. For most of history, keeping women focused on beauty, on pleasing men, on competition with other women over appearance was an effective way to keep them powerless, to keep them from uniting, to keep them from demanding equality. Third, we need to recognize that the beauty industry as it exists today profits enormously from women's insecurity. The global beauty industry is worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Companies make massive profits selling products by convincing women that they are not good enough as they are, that they need to change, that they need to fix their flaws, that they need to buy this cream, this serum, this treatment, this procedure. The industry has no incentive to tell women they are fine as they are. That would destroy the entire business model. So the messaging continues, the advertising continues, the creation and reinforcement of insecurity continues, the spending continues, the cycle continues. But here is what we can do as individuals and as a society. We can question beauty standards instead of accepting them as natural or inevitable. We can ask who benefits when women feel they must meet certain standards. We can recognize manipulation when we see it. We can choose to reject standards that are impossible, unhealthy, or based on exclusion. We can support each other, women supporting other women, in resisting pressure to conform. We can stop comparing ourselves to edited, filtered, professionally created images that do not represent reality. We can curate our social media feeds to reduce exposure to content that makes us feel inadequate. We can appreciate our bodies for what they do, for what they are capable of, not just for how they look. We can prioritize health over appearance when those two things come into conflict. We can choose activities and foods that make us feel strong and healthy even if they do not make us thinner or more conventionally attractive. And crucially, we can teach the next generation differently. We can teach girls that they are valuable for who they are, not how they look. That their intelligence, their kindness, their creativity, their courage, their skills, their passions matter more than their appearance. We can teach boys to value these things in others and not to judge people primarily on appearance. We can show children diverse representations of beauty. We can protect them from premature exposure to beauty industry messaging and social media pressure. We can give them the critical thinking skills to recognize manipulation and unrealistic standards. This does not mean we cannot enjoy makeup or fashion or taking care of our appearance. There is nothing inherently wrong with wanting to look nice, with enjoying beauty products, with expressing yourself through your appearance. But there is a crucial difference between enhancement for pleasure and destruction for beauty. There is a difference between personal choice made freely and social coercion that punishes women for not conforming. Our ancestors, those women throughout history who poisoned themselves with lead and arsenic, who blinded themselves with belladonna, who crushed their ribs with corsets, who broke their feet with bindings, who applied radioactive creams to their faces, they did not really have free choice. The social pressure was too great. The consequences of refusing to conform were too severe. They would have been unmarriageable, unemployable, socially rejected. So they did what they felt they had to do. They paid the price that was demanded of them. But we have more freedom now, more knowledge, more options. We can choose differently if we are brave enough. If we support each other, if we resist together, we can choose health. We can choose strength. We can choose to value ourselves as we are. The next time you look in the mirror and wish you could change something, remember this history. Remember the Egyptian women poisoned by lead coal. Remember the Roman women whose faces were destroyed by white lead. Remember Queen Elizabeth with her face hidden under inches of toxic makeup. Remember the Victorian women eating arsenic and crushing their organs with corsets. Remember the billions of Chinese women who spent their lives in pain with broken feet. Remember the women who applied radioactive creams. Remember the women who have died from cosmetic surgery, from eating disorders, from the endless pursuit of an impossible standard, and ask yourself, is this beauty standard worth it? Is it worth your health, your happiness, your life, your time and energy and money? Or is it a standard created by forces that do not care about you, that profit from your insecurity, that have always been willing to sacrifice women's well-being for profit or control? Because beauty should never cost what it has cost. Beauty should never require suffering, pain, sickness, or death. Real beauty, true beauty, lies in health and strength and confidence and joy. In bodies that work well and feel good. In faces that show real emotions in real life. In diversity and difference and authenticity. Not in meeting some narrow standard that changes every few decades anyway. Not in conforming to an ideal that was created to sell products or control behavior. Your body is not the problem. The standards are the problem. You are not broken. The system that profits from telling you that you are broken, that system is what needs to change.